My pattern told me to cut 9 strips 4.5 inches wide. I've trimmed off my selvage off the ends of the strips. I have sewn them together and I have pressed my seam allowances flat in one direction. My personal choice. You may choose to press open. You may choose to sew your border strips together on a diagonal. You may do that. Be aware, you will need extra fabric. Now, we took the quilt top upstairs to my living room, dining room, and we measured 3 places. 1, 2, 3. These were my measurements. If I do the math and add these all together, I end up with 254 inches, 254.75 inches. If I divide that by 3 to get the average, because I have 3 numbers or 3 measurements, I end up with 84.9166 inches, which in my mind is the same as saying 85 inches. So I'm going to cut my border strip for my lengthwise 85 inches. I have pinned these together. So I'm dealing with one unit now, and I have accordion folded them just for convenience. And I'm going to put this off to the side, bring this end up, and I want to make sure that I have a square cut here. I like these flathead pins because I can leave them in and I don't have to worry. So I'm just going to square off that edge. Now I know that that is perfectly straight. I am going to take the tape measure that I used to measure my quilt, because then it will be the same measurement. If I was to change tape measures, hey, who knows how close they measure. So I always use the matching tape measure. I need 85. So I'm going to lock this closed. There. So there's my 85 right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way down to whole measurements. So I have a 70 here. I'm going to put a pin in at 70 inches. I'm going to take this one out. I know that's 70. I'm keeping tabs on it. So I'll just slide this down a little bit. There's my 70. And I'm going to go to 60. I'm going to put that pin in there at 60. Slide that down. Slide over. Find that 60. And I've got a pin here. I'm going to replace it at 50. Slide down. We're at 50 there. And I'm going to put a pin in at 40. Now, for the camera, I'm doing this in 10-inch segments, but I would probably use my whole table just so I could measure maybe 20, 30 inches at once. So I'm going to pull this down. So there's my 40. And do you see I slide my tape measure down? Then I don't have to think and worry about remembering a measurement. You know what? I'm going to jump to 20 because I can. Put a pin there, and I'm going to slide this down right away to 20. Pull this over. There's my 20. And I'm going to put a pin. I want these two to match up. I'm going to put a pin right at 0. Then what I'm going to do is line up my ruler right at that pin mark. And if I'm not pressing too hard, I can pull that pin out, and I'm going to trim. I'm going to put a pin in the edge there and then lay this down to the side because the rest will be my top and bottom border. Now what I want to do is I'm going to unpin all of this by a border, because what I want to do is I want to divide it up. Now the big thing about borders is you want to make sure that you measure them carefully, you cut them carefully, and then when you sew them on carefully. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take one of my border pieces. There we go. I'm folding it in half. So I'm matching up that edge, working my way across. There's the middle of my border. So I'm going to put a pin in. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to fold the end of my border into that middle mark to find the quarter. And I'm going to put a quarter mark there and a quarter mark right there. That should be enough that I can work with my quilt. I'll put that aside. I'll grab my quilt. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my quilt. I'm going to match up my very top and my very bottom of my quilt. And at the midpoint, I'm going to put a pin. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this edge back. It's not as easy as it was with the border, but there. Fold that back, and I'm going to put a pin here. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this one in to that middle pin, just because I've got so many seams along here. There. Match that up. So now my quilt top has been quartered, and my my quilt itself has been quartered, and my border has been quartered. So what I'm going to do is just match up my pin marks. Take out my pin, put them there. I'm going to take this pin and we'll slide it into the end. Now, because I'm going to be manipulating this quilt, I go in a couple of times. So let's fix this one. We're going to go in, out, and I'm going to work my way across till I get to that next pin, in, out, in, out. Now, if for some reason my quilt was wonky and I had to do some easing, by quartering everything, I'm spreading out that difference. All right, let's pop this last pin on. Pin in, out, in, out. So I have a pin here and I have a pin here. I can check to make sure, oh, it looks like that bottom is a little bit loose. So what I may do is I may one hand on one end or my elbow, so I have a free hand, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit, bring that up to match. There we go. So it's all good. So I will do that check between all my pins. I'm going to sew this together. There's only 2 times that I will backstitch when I'm quilting. One is when I am sewing my border pieces together. I want to make sure that's backstitch, and that hasn't held, so I will need to go back and restitch that. Let's have a look at another seam intersection. Oh, I only have the one in there. Let's see this side. I need to go back and backstitch. So first thing I'm going to do is backstitch those 2 ends, because I don't want this pulling apart as I'm quilting my quilt. And again, I will backstitch at the beginning of my seam and at the end.